I might mention that because you didn't say anything about it recording.
It's a good thing you did. But what's nice about these vintage images, right? Excuse me, is, you kind of see the stitch direction on some level. And, they were pretty graphic when you think about it. And but, like this on the ribbon even, maybe I could put a little shading there if you wanted to. It depends on what you want to do. But these are not intended to be tiny. They're intended to be at least 3 to 4 inches big, right? And, when you look at this, you have to kind of decide what you're going to do first and, what's logical to do first. And, probably these little leaves. And then you have to make a decision. Do you want to put the, weed in a different color and the flower in a different color? So it's kind of up to you what you want to do with the detail on this, right? But, these are just little satin stitches you can see. And, these will be tiny satin stitches. And this would be a run stitch, right? And even on this, I think I would probably leave that at a triple run stitch because it's very narrow. But the leaves and everything, you can do in satin stitch. So what my line of thought is I would go ahead and do the leaves first, the leaves and the stems, and then the little sheaf of wheat or the flower, and then come back and do, I could actually do this section and then do the flower and the sheaf of wheat last, right? So let's go ahead and get started a little bit. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I'll kind of show you a little bit about pathing. And generally you try to start from the center out. But, sometimes like this is small. This is not going to cause a lot of push or pull on things. So in this case, it's okay if you're not starting from the center out, right? But, I would go ahead and get my little run tool. And, there's that little curly Q right there. Do the little curly Q. And then you have to make a decision here. So I would stop and go ahead and enter, right? And there's my in point. There's my out point. I've got the little curly Q. I could set my details later on this. When you're digitizing, you have to kind of decide what you want to do. Do you want to do your details as you go, or do you want to go in and then do your details, at the end of it, right? It's kind of up to you. In this case, I'm going to wait till I'm done with this section because I know A, I have to change the color, and B, I can go and pick these out pretty easy, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and use the column tool. And, I'm going to have to move my in and out points. Hi, Meg. But, these are very small, so you're going to want to angle. See how I'm doing these angle lines? I'm putting them at an angle. And the reason is that's a very short stitch length. So I want them to go at an angle. Okay, see how that's going like that? And, there's my in point, there's my out point. Let's go ahead and move the in point so I remember. And since I don't like to do things more than once, let me turn off my beads too so you can kind of see. I don't like to do things, that are repetitive over and over. If I've done it good once, then I'm just going to copy it. And then I'll just paste it. And I can go ahead and reflect. And I always forget on this one how I want to reflect.
It's the top one, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're right. All right, well, we're going to just move that over there. And then we can rotate a little bit. We go into Power Edit to do that. And I just want to rotate just a tad and move it into position. So, this is what I've got. And we show the beads so you can see there's my in and out point again. Here's, hey, Maggie, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. We just got started.
Yeah, I got up 2 hours ago because I worked the time out wrong. Because we're on daylight savings now.
Oh, okay.
So I was here 2 hours ago, and I went back to bed. And
yeah. Aw.
I was late.
But, we've gotten, I'm going to zoom in. We've gotten, here's our stem, right? And then we've got the little leaves. And you can see the angle that they're going at because it's such a short stitch, right? So, then I would just go back to my running stitch. You know that everything stopped and started here, right? And just go ahead and, put the other stem in. Now, I would end here because you're probably going to make that either a double or a triple. And then create another line. Let me zoom out a little bit. Over to this next leaf, right? And this is going to be, really like a little travel line. And, then you're going to do really another travel line. And I'll show you why. I would just travel this all the way up to here. And then go ahead and make your leaf. And remember, the reason you do the angles is because this is such a small stitch. So you're going to pull that so that it makes longer stitches. Okay, so I end here again, and I'm going to zoom back in. And then you're just going to take your running line, and you're going to go right over top of this line, back to here. And if you need to, let me change this color real quick because this gets to be very hard to see after a while. And we'll go ahead and change that to green. Okay, and if you need to, this is the last thing that we did, show beads, and, you can kind of adjust this a little bit if you need to. Although we're zoomed in so high, I don't think truly anybody is really going to notice. But, you have this little travel stitch right here, right? And you want to kind of try to line that up. And you might have to go into your vertex select and, arc that around a little bit. And the same thing with the one below it. You might have to arc that around a little bit. And that's when vertex selects really, does come in handy because you can adjust these and fine-tune things a little bit better to line up, over top of something, right? So that's pretty lined up in the scope of things. You're not going to see that when you're out at a one-to-one point, okay? So, I've gotten this done. I've traveled back to this little flower right to here. Here's my last piece, right? And the next thing I'm going to look at is how do I get down to the rest of these stems? And it's going to be the same thing. I'm just going to go ahead and create, a little series of travel stitches to here. And remember I told you from here to here I would probably leave that at running stitches because they're still very small. And I don't want to put a triple running stitch underneath my ribbon, so I'm going to travel again. And if you want to line up your travel stitches better, when like when I make this line right here, I would break it at these leaves, okay? Pick it back up. And then go ahead and make this leaf. And you're going to have to watch your in and out points too, right? So let me move my in and out points because I didn't travel all the way up on this one. So let's go ahead and move that in and out point. Okay, now the reason I broke those lines is, okay, here's my leaf that I just created, right? Okay, here's the line that I created before that. See right here? And there's the other travel line. So I need to get back to these leaves right here, which means I need to use this line or go right over top of it. But, I can just go edit, copy. Whoops, did not want to do that. Copy to clipboard, and then paste from clipboard. So now I've pasted it right on top, and literally right on top. So I can pull this down and put it after that, right?
It doesn't like doing the bottom one.
Yeah.
You have to flip it the other way. Yeah, that's right.
There we go. Okay, so now I'm just going to move my in and out points, right? So now I've got that perfectly over top of the other line. I don't even have to worry about it. You know, and I'm down to these two little leaves. So I can just create those little leaves, right? And then the same thing here. Let me go ahead and whip those leaves in there real quick. And if you want, you don't even have to stop here. You can just make a very small step and then, you know, go ahead and come back over here and just pick right back up. Except I made a very ugly leaf, so let me undo that. I forgot to right click. I've been working in a program that doesn't require right clicks. Like, it's the way you hold the mouse and how long you hold it that determines.
I don't know how you remember from one program to the next.
Sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm really bad at it. So, okay, so I would adjust this a little bit. So, you know.
I think you got the in and out points wrong on that other thing.
Well,
on the travel.
Yeah, I'll look at it and see in a second. But I would take that in point there and the out point down here, and I might want to change this
anyway.
There you go.
That angle a little bit there, you know. Okay, so now I'm right down here, okay?
Yeah.
And, you know, I've got this right here that, you know, was my travel stitch. And I'm just going to do the same thing. Edit, copy, and edit, paste. And then I have to drag that down to the bottom, which if it won't let me move it to the bottom, then, you know, I'll move it down here and just move things up, right?
Control C, Control V.
Control V.
Copy and paste is what you're talking
Control
about.
C, Control V.
Right.
I get sick of trying to chase the mouse everywhere.
Yeah, except then you
I'm
guys
lazy.
don't see what I'm doing, you know? Okay, so, you know, this has to move up still. Move up. Just move and cooperate. There we go. Okay, so now I just have to move these in and out points on this line. So my out goes down there, you know, the in goes up there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there I've got, you know, that side of that done pretty quick. And now I'm just going to travel back up and, you know, and continue to do, you know, I would come up, you know, this line here and do these as leaves as well. But this is a sheaf of wheat, so I could actually do those in brown tones. And really, when you come down to it, I'm just down to that last little section, right?
Bernie, would you do me a favor?
Uh-huh.
See that bent leaf on that wheat?
Right here?
Uh-huh. How would you do that?
Okay, hold on. Let me let me finish this section first,
Okay.
and I'll get to that.
Okay.
Okay,
I
so
thought you were going to go to something else.
yeah, I will in a second. But before you get too far along in something, remember we've just been doing running lines, and you have to decide what you want these to be. You know, do you want it to be a run? Do you want it to be a triple run? You know, which is your bean, right? So I'll do a bean. These, you know, you could come in here and select all of those at one time and just hold your control key and select all these leaves, right? Go and hit your settings. And, you know, do you want to drop the density, which, you know, maybe, I mean, they're pretty small anyway, you know. You could drop it down a little bit and maybe do a perpendicular underlay with one line. And, of course, you want to turn your pull compensation on. Okay, so that lightened those up a little bit because they're very small. You don't want to make them super heavy, even though they're small, right? So here's my triple. Here's my leaves. Here's another stitch. You know, here's a travel. You know, see, now do you know why I'm telling you to, before you get too far, to stop and decide what you're going to do. I'm going to go and make the ones I want to use as bean stitch. Okay, so there's that one. This is a travel. This is a travel. This and this is going to be a triple back. So, you know, stop and do what you need to do before you forget, you know, what the stitches are, right?
Yeah.
I usually do them right after I digitizing because otherwise I'll forget.
Yeah, me
I
too.
did what?
Once you get comfortable, then you'll find it'll be easier to remember. Okay, that's a travel leaf, travel bean. Okay. All right. So there are that's the quick and easy way to to do that. And just remember, drop your density down a little bit on these little tiny areas. And you don't need a lot of underlay, but you do need your pull compensation. Okay? And then from there, I would just finish this little section of this leaf, right? Now, to do the leaves, like, the same thing here on this sheaf of wheat here, I'm going to do a running stitch, a bean stitch. I would probably run it all the way up and then start, and probably do some of these little lines, or maybe not. Are those little lines important enough to do? That's something that you have to decide. And then do each set of these, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, come down and start the leaf. Now, here's what you have to look at on your sheaves of wheat, okay? First, you're probably going to have 2 or 3 colors here. If you want to shade or highlight these leaves a lot, then you're going to put a darker color on this piece right here.
Why?
And because it would be,
underneath.
Shadow.
Right, it's underneath. So it's up to you. You can go ahead and just use your thread direction to highlight that if you want, and keep it all one color. But I'm going to go ahead and just pick, I'll pick yellow or brown, right? But I'm going to use the, complex fill, or not the complex fill, I'm sorry, the column fill, and you're going to put 2 points close together to make that point. And I would angle this just a little bit. It's bigger than our little leaves, but if you're angling it when you come up here, it gives it a little more direction too. See?
Then I change the fill to the bisatin.
Right. Then you have to change to your fill. You don't want standard. You want something that's going to flatten that down quite a bit.
Up the top. Why don't you do a bisatin? And
I
then
don't want
you've
to
got
do
your line.
Yeah, I don't want to do bisatin because I can't really control it.
Oh, I think it looks fantastic on leaves.
Yeah, except that I can't always control, like
Where
the
it
bisatin
goes,
here,
yeah.
right? I can't always control how, and I need this to be flattened down so that it looks like it's more shaded. So I'm going to pick something like pattern 2, something that's got a small pattern to it, right? This is going to be too wide. Pattern 2 is pretty good. It's going to flatten that down pretty good. See?
Yeah.
Okay.
I see.
Okay, and I would leave this density alone because it's bigger than these.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay? And like on here, when I come around to that top part, if I want to leave this the same color, okay, leave it the same color. And then, you can use your stitch direction. It's up to you. But when I come around here, it's going to be a very blunt, no curve on this at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can start your curving again. And you're going to want to keep this fill direction different and overlap this a little bit. See, my fill direction's that way on this one.
Mm-hmm.
This is almost opposite, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let me get this over here, and because I want to overlap that, I might want to overlap this a little bit more. Okay, so now on this I could use the bisatin, but I honestly I don't like it. I'd much rather just use the satin and then go ahead and put something else in because I can't always control this as much as I want. And see, I've got this open up at the top now.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, I could adjust that. I could punch that so that there's a little bit of a curve. Let me show you the difference. I could punch it so that there's, like a little right click up here, right? And then come down and do that sharp angle.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything on the back, though, that's going to be hidden, like, or is supposed to be shaded, you don't want it to be satin because this is going to raise everything up.
Yeah.
All right, so I've got the little curve there now, okay, which makes using, like, that bi-satin option a little more feasible. Okay, but see, we're going to use the bi-satin. Well, I'll tell you why I don't necessarily like the bi-satin, okay? Let me get rid of this piece. Is that I can't always control the bi-satin. This one did pretty good. But if I'm really looking...
the line? You can't control that line that goes down through it? Is that what you're talking about?
Right, I can't always control it the way I want to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it won't always go where the leaf vein is supposed to be.
Right. On this one, it did pretty good. So it's an option, but just so you know, it doesn't always do what you want it to do.
Yeah, and you can't. Yeah.
And if I'm going to use it on this, right? Let me turn off my points. I'm going to use it on this. I have to be able to use it here too, and that is probably going to be a bigger problem.
Not going to work. Yeah, because one side's wider than the other.
Yeah. Right. And
yeah, that's
even
a good point.
Even if you get something close, it's okay, but we'll try it. I just don't think it's going to work. And, these are small, so we might be able to get away with it. But anything like that's bigger that's not symmetrical, it doesn't always do, it's not always as predictable as you hope. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if it'll behave on this, but I don't think it's going to do what I want. So, okay, so here's what you end up with. It didn't do too bad because it's small, right?
Yeah, it's not real brilliant though, is it? Oh, it looks all right from a distance.
Yeah, I mean that's a 1-to-1 size, so we can probably get away with it. I didn't curve that end up the way I should, or the way the image is, so you'd have to be a little creative.
Oh, we noticed it. We noticed you were being lazy. Yeah, okay.
Well, but that without that little curve on the end, it probably allowed it to look at least a little bit better, right? And if you are going to use this, right, you're going to want to drop the density down a little bit. With bi-satin, you have to drop the density. I would, because, remember this is supposed to look a little heirloom, and you're going to want to put a contour and at least one line of perpendicular on this, right? Maybe two, just to keep those two sides raised up. And make sure you put your pull compensation on. And you can drop the density down on this, too. If you're going to drop one, you should drop the other. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And, so that's kind of how you handle it. Now, if you really want to handle this so that, this looks a little more, I'm going to just grab purple, but if you put just a slightly darker shade, you can see it does make a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
And you could do that. You could go ahead and do that and use the darker color in the stem too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you're going to have you could get away without a jump here because you could do this, you could do the stem and then just run a little running stitch up here to begin, these little sections here, right?
Mm.
So you can do that.
The stem, then run up the center of the leaf to go to the end one.
Yeah, kind of run up this, up to here.
And then come back and run up the center of the leaf to do the fold over.
Well, if you did this, right? Yeah, I mean, you could put a running stitch in there, but if you did this first, because you want to do that first, you could travel down here, do a run stitch up as the stem, and then, but I just go all the way up here, and then do all of these, right? And then just take the jump from here, because you won't have one down here. You can move your in and out points. Just take that little jump, or do a little travel stitch on top, basically. But that's so narrow, I would probably just go ahead and take the jump, And first off, a jump between here and here, nobody's going to notice. Second, if you really want to, you could make this kernel a little bit lower and a little fatter so that it's right next to it, And that's so, so that's, these are the monograms. And really, when you look at this monogram, when they show that it looks like it's puffy and kind of beefy, remember, they were stitching this by hand, right? So they had options like underneath this is probably some kind of like a couching almost, right?
Yeah.
And so, to do this raised type of effect, first off, we have to, kind of consider we've got these ribbons, right? But you can still get that raised type of effect. You just have to remember you're going to have to deal with it on these ribbons too. But if you look on these ribbons, I've got this underneath section, that underneath section, the underneath sections in the bows, and I've got all of those little shading sections in there, right? I would do those in a darker color, just like one shade darker.
How do you do the end of the ribbon where there are 2 points on each side?
When we get, this, you guys know, let me show you this first, and then we'll cover how to do the points, okay?
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead, let me zoom in right about there. Maybe the bow's better because it's the same concept, but it's a bigger area. You're going to travel a lot when you're doing those underside, those shady sections, right? And if you really look at this, you have to decide in here, what came first, the ribbon or the letter. In this case, I would do these shaded sections underneath first. And if you're going to do this in a different color, right, a darker color than the top ribbon, that's okay. You can do that. You can do these shaded sections, travel along here, and, pick up all those little shaded sections without a jump. Do the letter, and then do the ribbon. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
And if you really want to, if you're going to do this ribbon anywhere near the color of the little flower, I would do the dark shaded section the same color as that flower. So, yeah, you have a jump, but it's a minor jump, right? You could come over and do this section, travel over here, do that little section underneath there, and jump over to the flower. It's going to be a small jump. It's not going to be intrusive. It's not going to get in the way, right? So something to think about. You have to kind of decide, or you can just make this flower any other color or any color you want and just have it at the end of the stitching, right? But what you have to think about to get your shading is this. I'm going to start with the bow because it's really the same concept. Look at how the lines are going. See how the lines are going on this picture? That is a good indicator. Let me zoom out so you can see a little bit better. That's a good indicator of what direction your stitches ought to be going. Okay. So if that's the case, then these sections should be at a slight angle or straight across to produce the most shading. Okay. Does that make sense too?
Yeah.
Okay, because what you want is you want it flattened, like we did in the wheat, in that leaf, and you want it a different direction. Okay. So I would still use the column tool and just go ahead and trace this section. And you can overlap a little bit. It's always a good idea to overlap a little bit. But I'm going to have my stitches going in this direction. Okay? Because when I do this, I'm going to use the column stitch, and this is going to be a little more complicated to do. you think of the best way to do this? I guess starting from here to here is good. Yeah, I think I'll put a couple little right clicks on the outside here, just a little bit away, because that gives me that instant curve. And then I can come up and catch that and make that a little sharper, right? And then I'm going to start right clicking here to get those curves. But up here, it's going to be a left click and then a right click down here. And then I'm going to start right clicking into that curve. And if you find that you aren't able to make, the curves like you want, right, then try punching it from the other direction. But when we get to the bows, you'll see sometimes you just have to start and pick it back up when we get to those points, right? And I'm kind of a little bit flattened on this underside right here, right? So I can still use my right click because I'm just, kind of going in the same direction, so it's not going to make much difference. But here I've got this bow, right? I've got the knot of the bow. And I am going to literally just go ahead and let that go underneath and change this.
Take care of it in the bow itself, in the knot.
Right, I'll let the knot cover it because there's no way to do, there's a no pattern, right?
There's a smooth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not the one we wanted. Standard. Yeah, standard, okay.
Random. No.
No. I should just get a satin pattern, right?
Oh, thank you, darling. Oh, I just got a cup of tea.
We'll go ahead and put it at 10. Anyway, so I should be able to just pick satin, I thought. Standard by satin.
Yeah, you can.
Going down.
Down. Oh, you've gone past it. It's just over smooth.
There, it's under random.
There it is, satin. Okay. So this is going to be kind of big, so I'm going to have to watch. Let's see what size it actually ends up being. But let me change the color too so you can see why, I would want to have that darker underneath. And I guess we'll just make it red. That's going to be very wide. But even going in this direction, as long as I pick a pattern that, is going to be kind of larger, like that's going to be a little bit smoother, right?
Yeah.
Than what's underneath. Then I'm going to still get that same effect. And, you're going to do both sides the same way. You're going to do that underneath section and then the top section. And you would just travel over, to do this section because right here is, I'm going to put my knot, on top, right? Because you have a bow on your, a knot in your bow, right?
But you wouldn't do that until after you did the letter, would you?
No, I would do the letter first, but I was just showing you on the shading thing. So, and if you look at this bow, right, look at the direction it's telling you to go. That's, it's the opposite direction. And the reason is because if you don't, it'll just blend into this. So when I make the bow, I'm going to go in the opposite direction. And I'll give it a little bit of a curve, right? Okay. That was a little fat on the bottom end. But you can see, that just the stitch direction is going to make a world of difference, right?
Yeah.
And on this, honestly, I probably would pull this down a little more and maybe make it a little sharper down on here, even though this is a little smoother. I'd probably make it a little bit sharper. Or I like this side much better because it's got that little cutout in it, and it gives it more dimension. I might just take this side, copy and paste it, and put it over there, to be honest, because to me, I don't like this side. But now,
well,
you're going...
got no shape. Even if you were to flick, like the bottom where the top comes out,
right. It has
if you were to make a little inward curve down the bottom, and then flip it out, it will look more like a natural bow.
Right. Well, basing it on this image, that's what I was saying if I flipped it out like that. But basing it on this image, that side really has no dimension. This side has dimension, right? I can do, even on here, it's got some dimension. And because you've got that hole, you can, your eyes more, you're more willing, I guess, visually to believe it's a bow.
Yeah. But the other side needs some shape to the end of it.
Yeah. And, because I can come down here and go like this.
There's a bit.
And, and then do this section with that little curve. But that little hole there is going to make a world of difference, right? So, okay, so, if you don't like this side of the bow, I'd go for this side and flip it and paste it or edit it. And it's going to be the same on all the letters, right? You could spend a lot of time and put these little lines of shading in if you wanted to, which would give it dimension. But honestly, I don't think it would give it enough dimension to merit, the work involved. You're not.
Yeah, and besides, when you're stitching letters, you really don't want all that fuss, do you?
No, not particularly. But,
I know I don't. I never stitch out letters that have got a lot of fussy stuff and colour changes just for a letter, unless it's a big monogram with a big fancy thing around it.
Yeah, these are supposed to be, the big hand-look monograms. But, all right, now we've got the same problem, about 4 inches.
Oh, okay, so they're big ones.
Right, they're big, they're designed to be, the letter is the embroidery basically kind of thing. But if you look here, we've got the same problem here as we're going to have with the bow pieces, these little points, right? And the way you're going to handle those is we'll start with the sticks on the letter. How's that? The way you're going to handle that, if you look, see these lines here? It's kind of telling you what they're doing. They come up here and they stop. They make this section and stop, and then they overlap it here. So literally what you're doing is this. And I would bring it up a little bit.
Drive carefully.
I'm driving as careful as I can, Meg.
Sorry, darling. Oh, look, I'm calling you darling now. Ray's going.
Tell Ray I said hello.
Bernie said hello. She said she's driving as carefully as she can. Keep your eye on the road, he said.
I'm trying.
Just don't look while we have a kiss goodbye. Bye.
My eyes are closed. All right, so let me put this. I thought I had both of them at random, but I got where both of them at that, but I guess not. Let me get this one. Okay, so now I've got these two pieces on the bottom, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that tool again. So I've got two separate pieces, and I just moved my in and out points, and I'm going to go out of 3D view number 1 because I can see my outlines much better. Let me show you. So you can see the actual outlines.
That made a world of difference doing that cut piece.
Yeah, and then when I come in and I click on this and come across, right, I can pick up right where I need to pick up. And I've got this little bow section. I don't want to necessarily stitch underneath that bow. So, I would go ahead and just piece that out. But this is what happens. If you turn that off, you can line up those pieces. And if you have to, zoom in and make sure that your outlines are as even as possible. Like, this isn't perfect, but nobody's going to notice that, right? So here's what you've got now. And let me take that. They will notice if it's a different fill type, but go ahead and change that. You don't want to do that exactly, but okay. So there I go. I've got the two pieces, and then it's seamless going into this pretty much, right?
Yeah.
And and that's how you handle this section. That's kind of an easy section to handle. Now, before we go on to the ribbon, something to think about is, remember I told you this had a lot of puffy underneath it, right? to, you know, they're doing this by hand, they're doing this with a heavier cotton, they're able to put some couching underneath this. You know, we haven't done that yet. We can use underlay and we can, you know, create something, but it is always easier if we build this up ourselves, right? And the beauty of at least the letter A is right now they're both, it's pretty symmetrical, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I could build that up, build up one side, flip it, as long as I, you know where my out point is. And the easiest way is just going to be to take your complex fill and go slightly inside of the, you know, the outline you're going to cover with the satin stitch. And, you know, I would take it, unless you're going to do your ribbon in a much lighter color than this letter. Usually you're doing the letter lighter, right? I would take it from here to here. You know, I wouldn't go over where you're going to have a bazillion sections for the bow, but, you know, I would build up this section, right? And it's asking me for my in and out point. If you forget, you can always move these, you know, and it's asking me for stitch direction. We want it to go that way. Okay, so you want your stitch direction. Yeah, you want your stitch direction going up and down, okay? But I'm not going to leave that density like that. You know, what I don't need is I need no underlay. I need no pull compensation, but I definitely need to take that down in density. Okay? That's one way to do it, to build it up like that. And I could add a little more density if I wanted to. You know, so I've got a fill underneath it that's going to lift everything up, right? And if you do it like this, since we have to break in a section anyway, and, you know, if you want to break here, you can. To me, this is no big deal unless, of course, the letter's going to be much darker than your ribbon. In that case, then break each section. But in this case, you know, since really, slide this over a little bit, you know, really, unless this is going to be darker, this is not going to be a problem. You know, it depends on what your personal preference is. Like if you're making a black letter and white ribbon, then don't do this. You know, break these sections. But once you've got that done, you can see you've got nice little kind of, you know, ramping of stitches underneath there. So you've got some things underneath it. And then I would come in and do this, but you still need to add some underlay, and I'll explain why. You're still going to also need to break, you know, at these ribbon sections with the satin stitching, right? But on the satin stitching, when you go into your underlay, you can do a contour and you can do perpendicular, and you can do this a couple of different ways, okay? You can just give it a couple of lines of perpendicular stitching, right? And that'll lift it up a little bit. Let me go to my stitch ribbon here. Okay, there's our stitching starting, right? And then we come up here and we're going to start on, you know, there's our
there it goes. I was going to say, I got a blank screen.
Can you guys see the screen?
I do now.
We do now.
Okay, so see, there's my contour. There's my couple of lines of perpendicular, right? And then there's my satin. Okay, so you've got a little bit of underlay, or you could do it like this. It depends on you know, what effect works best for you, actually. If you're putting this on toweling, then you definitely want to do something like this and put an underlay and make a grid, right? But what you might want to look at is when you do your satin stitching and you get to your underlay, instead of maybe just a couple of lines, you know, let's try like 5 lines. And, you know, you have to play with this because each setting, but see, I've got kind of the same effect without creating another area. Okay? So, you know, play with that and see which one's going to work best for you.
What determines how many lines that you put under something?
On this, like this size area right here, I would probably just put 2. I do the contour and I would just probably put 2, maybe 3. Because I want this to poof up a little bit, I put that many lines underneath it. But that's really overkill for standard embroidery. Okay, that's a lot. I don't need that much for standard embroidery. If I'm doing towels, the best thing that you can do for underlay is, let me just grab this, is use a complex fill. And, don't worry about the underlay on whatever you're doing. Use a complex fill. And open up your density. And use the contour and perpendicular underlay here. See what happens? I mean, it's like a mesh. What that does is, and I would open this up maybe a little bit, but what that does is it smashes down the terry toweling.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So, it makes a grid underneath it. And to me, that's heavy, and it's not our fill. It's actually the underlay that's heavy. Stitch length, density, I probably make this 3, maybe 3.5. See? But that would be for something that, you want to do, like, a nappy type of fabric that you needed to hold down pokies with, right? Now, that's a lot of stitches, but even if you use something like, there's this, I forget what it's called now, and I have a bunch of it. It's this plastic stuff from Hoop It All that you can put down to, keep the terry toweling from coming through. Even if I do that, I still have the poof involved with the terry toweling.
Dry cover up.
That's it, dry cover up. So, even with using dry cover up, you might want to put some form of grid just to smash the area down to the stabilizer.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that, because you have that poof. It's not always just the pokey. Sometimes it's the poof involved in a fabric. So anyway, so play with this, and it depends on, it depends on what you're doing. Like, to me, this is a better option, with the underlay and putting more lines in, because I can always put, if worst case, I can always say, what, let's make this like 7 lines, right? Mm-hmm. And, I always have the option to increase that. Okay. And that would definitely add a little bit of poof, because each one of these is, you remember when you were a kid and you made like clothesline tents?
Mm-hmm.
And, if you had only the line in the middle, then, it held up the tent pretty good in the center. But if you had that three lines on a clothesline, then you were in heaven because you had it held up even more.
Right.
It's the same thing with satin stitching, wide satin stitching, okay? It's the same exact thing. You want it held up out of the fabric,
You think of the funniest things.
Those clothesline tents were like the bomb,
Oh, dear. Oh, sorry.
My aunt and I were discussing.
You've never done that, Meg?
Oh, yeah.
My aunt and I were just discussing that. My aunt is 4 years older than me, and I grew up with her, right? And my other aunt, who's, older, there's like 18 years difference between one set of kids and then the next set, which were closer to my age at my, from my grandmother, right? But my one aunt, Alberta, had made me a clothesline tent, and I was like, I don't know, 5 maybe. And I was so thrilled about this clothesline tent. It was so cool because Bertie's very artistic, and she made it like with rooms and it, and it was really sweet, and clothespins. I mean, she went all to town on this, right? And my Aunt Sheila came down, who was 4 years older than me and tall enough to unpin my clothesline tent. Which she did, and wouldn't put it back up unless I ate this butterscotch pudding that she made. And I used to love butterscotch pudding, right? But it was, back in those, they didn't have the instant pudding then. So she cooked it, and the scab must have been like an inch thick.
Yeah.
And to this day, she traumatized me. I have never been able. I got physically ill, and I've never been able to eat butterscotch pudding since then. And so she wouldn't put my clothesline tent back up.
How funny.
Oh, dear me. That's so
Yeah,
funny.
she's actually turned out to be a nice person, but I was a little, wondering when we were growing up there.
I had a sister like that who's 4 years older than me. That's the kind of thing she used to do.
Yeah, Sheila was, I can remember begging her, and I'm sure I was a giant pest, right? But I can remember begging her and nagging her this one day to play Barbies with me. So she said she would, and I should have known. And I had this one Barbie doll named Stacy with red hair, right? Long red hair. And by the time Sheila was done convincing me that Stacy needed a makeover, she had no hair.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, my grandparents made her buy me a new Barbie doll for that one.
Oh, wow.
But
oh, that's terrible.
That's okay. I've gotten back at her through the years because everybody thinks
we
we're
kids do.
Yeah, everybody thinks we're sisters, right? And so every time, we're around someone and we'll introduce each other or, whoever introduces, and I'll say, yes, this is my aunt, and she is much older than me. And then I move away from her really quick because she punches.
Oh, dear.
So, all right, so back to the digitizing. Now, if I do this and I make it heavier, right? Mm-hmm. Depending on what size you make this letter, the other thing you might want to consider is we have a lot of underlay on this, right?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
But you might want to bump that density up and make sure you put your pull compensation on. And maybe take the underlay down to, a smaller number, right? Mm-hmm. But test this because, this, my slider's a little iffy, but you can see, it's a little beefier already, right? And some of that's a pull compensation, but some of it is because there's more stitches in it, okay? Mm-hmm. But now, see this ribbon right here?
Yeah.
Okay, you are going to have to do a little bit of a test and see what works best for you because it depends on your thread. But my first instinct on this would be this. Let me zoom out a little bit. I just want to zoom in a tad there. My first instinct is, okay, I don't want my ribbon to sink underneath here. So it's going to have to be, just as dense and just as lifted up as this is, right? Mm-hmm. I tend to not want to sew over top of something thick like this.
Right.
But I definitely would be putting my, contour and several lines of the underlay on this ribbon where it's, crossing this letter.
Or a piece of cover-up.
You're going to have a dip unless you extend this letter all the way down, right? Yeah. Which you can do. You can do that and just put the ribbon over top of it. You're going to have a dip here. Okay, so see which one works better. Gotcha. Do you like beefing this up, or do you want to put the letter all the way down? But see, you'd have to be careful right at this knot because there's so many layers there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and you can see here, this is just normal because it sinks underneath. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's just a normal, normal density because it's sinking underneath. You would actually do this section first and then do these side pieces, right? Mm-hmm. All right, so now the other thing
Can I give you another suggestion that you've probably all thought of anyway, but I've tried it and it works. If you're going to put things on towels, if you get the towel and get some of that can spray starch and iron the section you're going to embroider on with the starch and flatten it all in one direction, it is so much easier to sew on. It just really makes it easier to do any embroidery on.
But will it fluff
works
back up when it washes?
Yeah, it fluffs back up as soon as the starch is washed out, you know.
You still want to put cover up, like.
Yeah. Oh, I still use that as well, but it just makes it so much easier to sew, and your designs don't have to be that heavy underneath, you know, because you've already flattened all the pokies down, and when you put the dry cover up, they don't come through anyway.
And the other thing, a can of heavy starch in a Teflon sheet does wonders for embroidery.
It does. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And but on this letter, the density on this program makes me nervous, to be honest.
Yep.
Because you don't know what it's doing. So that's why I said just be careful with this. If I left enough of the underlay underneath, I'm probably just fine with the standard density. Okay. But this is going to dip, so I have to be careful. It's going to dip down a little bit if I make this too heavy, right? So you have to, if you're going to do a lot of underlay here, you're going to have to do the underlay here too. Okay?
Yeah.
So, and, like on the letter, do this first, do one of these sides. First I would do this, travel down to one of these little pieces, come up, get this piece, and then come up and, do the rest of it. And then it automatically, all I have to do is move my out point over to here and begin the reverse process, right? And when you go to
a piece of puffy foam under it,
you could, but the problem is this on this design: these ends are not closed.
No, not that one. The ribbon. You can just stick it and then trim it. A bit hard. I was being funny.
Yeah, I mean you could on some level, except you would have to do this. Like seriously, with puffy foam, see these side pieces.
Yeah.
You would have to make sure that you came down and closed down here. So instead of, punching maybe like this, right?
Yeah.
You would, have to make sure that you close. Let me do this one side, and I'm not going to do this perfect, but see, this point up here would be okay on the puffy foam because it's closed. But it's this side down here. You would have to make sure that, like on this one, I can do it. I could, based on the image, I could, go ahead and punch it a little bit different because your ends have to be closed for puffy foam or your stitches fall off.
Ah, gotcha.
So, whenever you use puffy foam, you want to make sure that those come to
You've got
point.
Stitching on the end. Right. You've got stitching around the end as well.
See, this would be okay here, and that point would be okay, but this side would fall off. So you'd have to make sure that you close those ends somehow.
I didn't know that because I've only used it once, and everything was closed around it. So
yeah, and that's why when puffy foam first came out, 15, 20 years ago or something. We were all doing just slapping the satin stitches on it. Oh, this is cool. Until you wash it and it starts to fall off.
Right.
And then you have like these big loopy stitches, right? With no more puffy foam, and the puffy foam works its way out. And so just make sure you close points on if you use puffy foam. But you could if you wanted to, and that would give it, they've got small puffy foam. Like low loft puffy foam, so you could give it just a little dimension.
I never even heard of it. So.
You know what it is? It's pretty much that craft foam at Joann's or Michael's.
Oh, I gotcha.
And they'll tell you that it's something better, blah blah blah, but not really. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I don't have Joann's over here. I used it for a globe of the world. And I used it underneath all the countries to raise them up.
Oh, that'd be cute.
It was fantastic. It turned out really good. I was really, really pleased.
And like I couldn't use this stitch on it. I would have to use a satin stitch because this would just tear it up.
Yeah.
and stuff. But, all right, so you guys understand how to stretch out your stitches here, right? And how to get this, these shading kind of areas underneath, even if you use the same color. And you know now how to join this. Like we were talking about coming over here and coming up to here and then coming down here, right? To get this to work correctly, I would probably do this section, this section, this, and then when you get down to this section, I would do this section and then travel down to one of these and come up and do it like this so that you can get that. Because the reverse doesn't work. Let me move this.
Yeah.
The reverse does not work. I mean, you have to be, I've got it. It looks pretty good right now, that I've moved that one piece up, right? But, when you really look at it, you can see
you've really got to have your arrows in exactly the right, your stitch directions exact. Absolutely. I do a lot of this stuff.
And, so, I mean, but, you are better off if you just take that travel stitch and do it, these pieces and then on top. Okay, now, the ribbon is really pretty much the same concept, the points on these ribbons, right? It's really
quite pretty.
The same concept. I would use, the complex fill, and I'm getting sick of that color, so we'll pick purple. And, there's my points. No, after a while, it's like, And, I would come up to here and, there's, move your out point. Okay, so I would move that out point, and although I could probably leave that one out there because I'm going to overlap a little bit. And then, and then you're going to create the other one. And you're going to overlap just a little bit. And let me move my endpoint because I want my endpoint to be up here too. And, so, and those are a little bit irregular shapes, and I've got that one going at a little bit different angle. But let me zoom in, zoom out, and zoom back in on just this. What you want, and, it's not always easy to see, but let me change these both. Okay, so see that's a little bit different angle. And it's okay, I can get away with that. It's not so severe, but go out of 3D so you can see those outlines. And you want to overlap these. And I'll show you, like, on this, I guess it is actually going to be a problem. I'll probably change it, but we'll look and see what it looks like. And this is what it looks like in 3D. Except for that's the wrong fill.
There's something I really wish about this program, that it would keep what the fill is that you're using, when you're doing a lot of it, and not have to keep going and changing it all the time.
Now, see how...
I see what you're saying there, yeah.
Right, so, if that happens, then, just select the piece and...
angle on.
No, that actually adds angles. This I can just come in here and drag them. And, here's one. And, if you need to, one of them's hiding behind my in and out point, actually, I think. Yeah, there it is. So you're going to straighten that out as much as you can. And you don't want to move it, but move your in and out points back. And, you can see it hides it. I'm a little bit off right here, which I noticed right away. But, that blends it a little bit better because of the angle of this, right? So, you can get away with a little bit more when it's a satin type of fill, but you'll still notice it it looks better on the screen than it does when you stitch it, even though it's a fill.
Mm.
So I'm going to send you, excuse me, I'm going to send you all the letters to this. And
awesome.
So I expect at least one letter out of all of you.
Right.
I will do my best.
I'm getting ready. Otherwise, I'd do a screen dump.
Go out of town, so.
All right. Well,
that's a good excuse.
I want to go see my grandbaby.
Aw, cool. Well, they go to sleep at some point at night.
Well, yeah, that's true.
I'm just teasing.
Take your laptop.
Yeah, I am going to pack the laptop, that's for sure.
But, so I'll send you the whole alphabet. And, this is from a vintage French magazine from like the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
And stuff, so, but,
Before we close,
mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're getting ready to close or not, but, that email that I sent you about that
thing? The stop sign.
Yes.
You said you were doing applique, right?
Well, I was doing the stitching around the applique, and that thing kept popping up, and I was like, where is this thing coming from?
Okay, so you weren't doing actual applique, though, were you?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay, all right, so, here's my line, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we'll auto-close that one. Okay, and let me backspace and enter.
This thing that you sent us, that I was doing the outlines on it.
Uh-huh.
And that thing kept popping up, and I finally just ignored it and didn't worry about it.
Yeah, the stop sign.
What's the stop sign?
Right there.
Right there.
Oh, okay. That's one of those view things.
Right. What it is see the little show commands?
Yeah.
Just click on that and it'll go away.
Well,
I'm thinking, hold on, what's she doing driving on the computer?
Well, I got my manual out, and I looked in there, and I couldn't find any place where it said that it had
the manual's not real helpful. But if you see, like when I have show commands on, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think these actually get bigger, but let me see if I can find where to go. There's the scissors. Well, there's a whole bunch of little commands. Okay, there was a C that was showing up.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, let me move the in and out points and see if I can get the C to show up. Okay, somewhere in there's a C. That means color change.
Okay.
And then there's a couple of other ones too.
The little scissors.
Yeah, the scissors for trim.
Trim. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's trying to think of some of the other ones.
What was throwing me on that is when I was doing these lines on this cut work, it kept showing what I thought was stitch lines out from it, that was radiating out from it.
Oh, those travel jump stitches.
Right. I thought, well, that's the jump stitches, and I don't want those in there.
Yeah, you can't get rid of the jump stitches unless you make a travel from one section to the other. Those dash lines will just show up.
That's what I was doing, but it was showing those lines up, and finally I just thought, well, screw it. I just think I'll pay attention to them. If they show up when I stitch it out, then so be it. But
yeah, see, there's my jump right there.
Yeah. Did we go over the homework to start with?
I'm talking about they were radiating out from the little square thing, the little stop sign.
Oh, huh. Oh, maybe it was the beginning and end points. Yeah, it might have been the beginning and end points, because that stop sign right there is actually where you start and where you stop. That's center. That's dead center is what it's representing.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bernie. I really learned something now.
See how it
Because
moves every time I move this?
When I first started punching for the
I didn't know
satin
that.
stitch, on the outside, it was over on that far left, and then the next thing I know, it's in the middle.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, every time I move something and recenter this design, that stop sign's going to move. Because what the command is on your machine and on commercial machines is you start in the center and then go to the first place and you end at the center point.
Okay.
I forgot about that.
That's brilliant. Thank you for that. No, I didn't know that. So that's, something I've learned today as well as all the other stuff that's really going to be really helpful.
I have another question.
Uh-huh.
How do you know how wide to make when you're working with that, like on this cut work, and I was going around for the final stitch, the satin stitch that goes around it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know how wide to make that?
Okay, see down here, down on the bottom of your screen?
Uh-huh.
Okay, when I click, see how it's telling me my distance, that it's 67 millimeters?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, now it's 10 millimeters. My grid is 10 millimeters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now it's, 3 or 2 or whatever millimeters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you would lose your mind looking at that.
Yeah.
Okay, we used to have to do it that way, but you've got a grid space that's 10 millimeters, right? So if you're going this far, that's, really like 1.5 times. That's almost, 12 to 15 millimeters this way, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you fill up one of your grids, you know that it's, pretty much 10 millimeters. So, once you get, start like this, if you want a 3 millimeter wide, or close to 3, make your first one and then try to stay at that width, okay?
What we did was the style stitching first, remember?
Yeah, the other thing that we did was we used the steel stitch.
Right.
Yes.
And you can control how wide the steel stitch is set in your settings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And you could trace over top of that knowing that's 3 millimeters.
Did that, but it didn't work. I still had all those horrible lines on the outside.
Okay.
Twice.
So,
are you still there, Gloria?
I'm trying to figure out how to word this.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, what you're talking about here, but
Okay.
what I don't know is when I don't know it until I stitch it out that it's too small.
Okay, you don't want to go below 1 millimeter on when you're doing like like if you're doing satin stitching, and what ends up happening is this: most of the time you're like zoomed in, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's real easy to get something like this. Come on, right? And you get these little teeny tiny things that are literally like 1.5 millimeters,
stitches.
right? Okay, that's where you have to kind of look at your grid. Okay. This is 10 millimeters. So if I want to get a feel for, what 2 millimeters is, okay, on your grid. You figure 2 millimeters, 2.5 millimeters, is right there, right? 5 millimeters is, about halfway, right?
Okay.
So that'll give you an idea. But it does help if you just go ahead and take a section and, go ahead and use that steel stitch. Because if I happen to be curving like this, right, then that's going to be really hard to figure out what that is. So if I use that steel stitch as a guide, it's like, hand memory. After a while, when you're too wide, because you'll be used to following an outline like this.
Mm.
Okay? And you'll know, it's like when you, it's like handwriting. That's all muscle memory, right?
Mhm.
And, it's the same thing with this. Like, you can almost feel it after a while when, like, if you jump or you go too far, you can really almost feel it. Okay? And, so, practice with those with some steel stitches. And, you guys got the practice images, right?
Yeah, I sent you a couple of them in.
You know what? I honestly did not get those. And I've got
and Bernadette and your Bernie I sent it to your work email.
Oh, okay. I'll go look in there
The
and
work
see
thing
in
when
there. But practice those, like that one that goes round and around and around and around.
Yeah, I did that one.
Do the steel stitch on that, and then practice punching over top of that. Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that'll get that's all getting everybody used to right clicking and the Bezier curves. But you can do the same thing on the steel stitch. It's just a line basically with some fat to it.
Mhm.
And then satin stitching, the column is the same thing, only you're putting 2 points in. You can still right click to get the curves, right?
I don't have too much trouble doing the curves. It's just when they come to a point, and then that's when because some of your points are inside, some of your points are outside.
Right. Like if I
like
do
on a flower.
Yeah, if I have something like this, right? And I need to punch that, right? Let me pick my red color again and my column tool.
Don't do something so simple like a square. Do like a tulip.
Okay.
There you go.
Now we know where she's coming from.
Okay, hold on. Let me do this with a steel stitch, right? Okay, so we've got a point, right? You've got the curves, and my tulips are going to be a little abstract, but
That's okay.
I'm talking about these types of curves, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And those types of points.
Yes, ma'am. That works. That's fine.
Okay. All right. So there we go. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and clear off the rest of the stuff because it's kind of clutter. And hit the quiet on my phone. Of course, my phone with the new upgrade won't ring when I want it to.
Mhm.
All right. So I've got these complicated little corners, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to pick blue, and I'm going to zoom in. And you've got an inside corner and an outside corner there, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we'll start with the inside corner. Okay, first off, never start punching on a corner, ever. You can't line it up.
Yeah, I learned that.
Yeah, so you don't punch on the corner, so you're going to start out here. And, you're going to follow this, right? And this is where you have to watch. Like, I don't want to come down here and jam a point in here and come over and then jam another point. I want to stand back a little bit, right? And then left click, and then see how I'm angling like I'm mitering the corner like I'm quilting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Left click, and then, come back up. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's, that is, let me get rid of all these little commands. Okay, see how I got that corner?
Right.
Okay, now on an outside corner, it's going to be the same thing. Well, it's going to be kind of the same thing, I should say. I don't want to jam a lot of points up in here, so I'm going to stand back before I get to this point. I only want one point in here, and it's the same thing. I'm going to angle out to that point. And then I'm going to come back and try to go as far away from that point as I can. Sometimes you can't go very far, right? But that will give me my point. I can even right-click if I'm going into a curve like I did right here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I get that outside point.
Okay. And every time you go into a corner, they're all left clicks, right?
Yeah. Every time it's a point, it's a left click. Now, you know, down here, right, let me get rid of this blue section. There's a little bit of a curve to that, just, you know, because of the steel stitch, actually.
Right.
But, you know, I could come out and do something like this. Left click, right click, and then come back, and I'll get a curve. But the curve's not real controllable, okay? If you're going to do something that has a curve on the outside, you're going to want to do these points a little bit closer, but you have to be careful not to jam up that point, okay? But I'm going to have to control the curving, which means I need to have those points closer together. See the difference on the curve?
Okay.
Okay.
And then if you go into vertex select, you can actually move
clean
it to
up
make
that
it smaller. Yeah. So
Clean
that's
up
fiddly. That's
So,
fiddly.
right. So, but, you know, like usually you're not going to have a curvy point that tight. The only reason we have it is because of the steel stitch. That's how the steel stitch handled points being jammed in there, okay? What happens if I jam too many points into a corner is this. I get funky stuff because the program is going to try to, you know, not jam me up with 8 bazillion stitches, right? So it's going to try to stitch filter some of this out. And sometimes it stitch filters in a way that I don't quite like. And, you know, let me redo that because that shouldn't have done it quite like that. But sometimes, you know, if I get these points over top of each other, you know, the program is thinking, what the heck are you doing, right? See how close those points are?
Yeah.
Okay, and see how that curved now? See how it started to filter out? See how clean that point is compared to this one with more points in it? And there's your stitch filtering. The program is trying to handle not jamming every stitch into, you know, one section. So, you know, that's why you want to try to control how many points. The fewest amount of points that you enter over here, the better the results are going to be.
Well, when you get that, let's see, is it in that? I don't know. I think the one I digitized, I think I got sent to you. So you can look at that and then tell me where I know where I screwed up, but you can tell me what I did, how to fix what I didn't do right.
Okay. All right. I can do that.